where the United States has acted internationally, it's the same way. You look at the trail of intervention, it's almost always the same. Not just third world countries, for example. Like I just came back from Italy, okay? You may not know this, but Italy was the target of the major CIA activities since its origins. The internal record runs dry around the mid-70s, so don't know, can't say after that. But from the origin of the CIA in 1947 up to at least the mid-70s, Italy seems to have been targeted more than any other country in an effort to undermine Italian democracy. Italy was regarded as sort of a semi-third world country, had a very strong labor movement. And when the American Army, in fact, the American British armies, what they called liberating Italy in 1943-44, they were appalled to discover that northern Italy had been liberated by the resistance, which had established a functioning society with very strong labor control. The resistance was mostly labor and peasant based. They'd held off the Germans, had liberated most of the place. They had instituted worker management in factories. They had thrown out what were called, what the Americans and British, they were protecting workers, what they call, I'm now speaking for the terminology of the US British documents. They were keeping useless workers and throwing out, arbitrarily dismissing owners and bosses. And that's, of course, intolerable. And the system was functioning. And furthermore, they were focusing on unemployment, which was recognized was Italy's major problem. But that's their problem, not our problem. Our problem is to restore the traditional structure, which meant traditional hierarchies. Actually, it meant restoring fascist structures and fascist collaborators and so on. And a big effort was made to do that. And it was not entirely successful. By 1948, when the first election took place, it looked as if labor-based forces would probably win. And a huge effort went into trying to ensure that that wouldn't happen. By withholding food, Italy was starving, by restoring the police to fascist control, by all sorts of threats and manipulation. Pretty big operation, and the first major CIA operation, among others. And they took it really seriously. Again, something you would learn in a free society is there's a thing called the National Security Council, which the main planning outfit, which publishes, doesn't publish, but it produces documents, top-level planning documents, which are among, not the only important ones, but among the most important ones. They tend to get released maybe 35 years later, so you can look back at them. So we have them now from the late 40s. And the first one, NSC 1, 1947, is devoted to Italy. And it calls for, it says, we're going to try all these measures to ensure that Italy doesn't have a free democratic government, which would have, they don't say it this way, but what amounts to, that, in which there'd be a big role for the organized working class in Italy. And they say, but if this doesn't work, if the communists, as they call them, which means, in fact, a lot of them were communists, but if the communists come to power through a legal vote, through a legal election, then the United States is going to declare a national emergency and is going to support military activities inside Italy to overthrow the democratically elected government. That's how seriously they took it back in 1947. They also knew exactly why the communists were powerful. You read it in the records extensively. It's because they were honest, because they were supporting working class interests. It's true that they were collaborationists. They weren't trying to separate Italy from the Western Alliance or anything, but they were defending working class interests and people supported them. And they had a mass-based working class party. There were plenty of others besides communists. But they had to be prevented either by coercion, like, say, withholding food and violence, or if that didn't work, by direct intervention, military intervention. That was taken very seriously, and in fact, it goes up to the present.
How is it that the wealthy can, quote, pull the wool over the eyes of the American worker by controlling the power in government and using it against the working public, using it against labor unions?
Well, take right now, let's say, as an example. There's a couple days ago, I don't know if you're bothered, I put myself through the pain of reading the New York Times every day for some masochistic reason, which I won't try to explain. But they've got their big chief correspondent, sort of the main thinker, is a guy named Thomas Friedman, who had an article 3 or 4 days ago in which he, big think piece, in which he said, well, he said the Cold War's over, so the breakdown isn't hawks and doves anymore. We have to have some new breakdown. And he said the new breakdown, he says there's two. One is between integrationists and, what was the other term? I forget. Anti-integrationists. That means people who are in favor of more globalization and what they call free trade, which isn't free trade, and all that kind of stuff. And people who want to slow it down or end it. That's one break. And the other is between people who are in favor of a safety net and those who think that everybody ought to, be on your own and get what you can. Okay, so those are the two ways people break up. And that gives you 4 possible types of people, right? 2 of them he sort of dismisses as lunatics. So there's the Zapatistas and Ross Perot. They fit into 2 of those boxes. The other 2 boxes are sort of sane people, Clinton and Gingrich. And I'll put aside Clinton, but Gingrich, and this gets right to your point, I think, Gingrich is put in the corner that says integrationist and devil take the hindmost, everybody for themselves. Well, that's testable. It's testable that that's Gingrich's position. For example, on the question of whether Gingrich is an integrationist, like in favor of free trade, we can ask how he reacted when the Reagan administration instituted the greatest wave of protectionism since the 1930s. That's just straight protectionism, alongside a huge increase in public subsidies to private power, to industry, along with, say, the biggest nationalization in American history, the takeover of Continental Illinois Bank, and so on and so forth. That's all radically anti-integrationist. Okay, how did Gingrich react? We can ask that question. Answer is he thought it's great. What about the safety net story? I mean, Gingrich is in favor of people sort of being out there on their own, rugged entrepreneurs and so on. I mean, you can check that too. He represents a county, district, Cobb County, Georgia, which happens to be and he happens to hold the national championship in bringing federal subsidies to his rich constituents, to be precise, among suburban counties in the United States. Cobb County ranks 3rd in federal subsidies, ranks right after Arlington, Virginia, which is part of the federal government. So, of course, they get a lot of federal subsidies, like the Pentagon's there and so on. And Brevard County, Florida, which is the home of the Space Center. So it's another part of the federal government. But if you move outside the federal government itself, Gingrich's district is number 1. They get more federal subsidies than anybody. The biggest employer in Cobb County is Lockheed, which is a publicly subsidized private profit corporation. They don't, they sell commercial planes, but those are just, as everyone knows, they're just, they use military technology is, the way the system is designed, technology is developed under the guise of the military and then handed over to private power when it works. That's true of everything. Airplanes, computers, the internet, you name it. And Cobb County is right at the center of this. Well, he's in favor of being, all out on your own and fighting in this harsh world. Ridiculous. He's the biggest welfare freak in the country. That's literally true. Except that he wants the welfare to go to very rich people. Notice this is not what's called corporate welfare. What they call corporate welfare, which also never gets touched, is some different category completely. That's like giving a special, shot in the arm to some particular corporation. This is something quite different. This is the way in which our economy works. The way our economy works, take just about any dynamic sector of it at least that I know and I've studied, and you find that it's based on massive public subsidy and privatization of profit. Public pays the costs and takes the risks, and private systems make the profit if there is any. Cobb County is just an extreme example of this.